Hello, I'm Tatiana GINZBURG. I am a researcher from the University of Latvia, and I'm very happy to share my research with you. Let me see that it works. Right. I work in adult education and I research adult education, but I believe this topic can be also interested in for higher education researchers. Okay, I'm not right. That's what I'm going to talk about, and I'll start with saying that current socio-demographic changes, technological changes, and also political changes increase the role of adult education in general. People will need to study and to upgrade their skills all their lives. Equally, it might be relevant for adult education establishments because of the changes in student population. Many students come or re-enter adult formal education later in life, and they should be treated as adults who have somewhat different requirements compared to typical undergraduate students. And that's why the number of adult or adult-like programs, think of micro-credentials, for example, is going to proliferate. What is needed, though, is to ensure that the effectiveness, the teaching effectiveness, is comprehensively assessed and communicated to potential students and also employers and policymakers. Now, the definition of teaching effectiveness is a rather controversial topic. We use very many different criteria for teaching effectiveness. For example, student evaluations of teaching, SETs, so-called, learning outcomes, classroom observations, and many others. However, most of research is done in secondary and higher education, whereas adult education is kind of left slightly behind. Now, I am using Taylor and Thien's idea of student-centered approach to teaching effectiveness in this research. There are three viewpoints I'm looking from at this issue, and looking from the learner's perspectives. Andragogy is one of the most commonly used theories of adult learning, and it explains both students' motivation to study in general, that is, they need to solve some problems, that's why they come to study. It explains motivation to learning languages, especially because knowledge of language, especially knowledge of English, affects the social capital of adults. And ultimately, it allows seeing adult language students as the extreme case of the so-called student customers. And therefore, I'm looking at their perceptions and learning outcomes as for teaching effectiveness. Now, to implement the framework, the pragmatism, it has to be pragmatic. The framework is not supposed to be used to inspect, but rather to inform and improve practice. And therefore, the context is important. Perhaps not every measure should be used every time. However, what is important is that measures, the instruments that we use in assessing teaching effectiveness should be matched to the concept. Basically, we need to know what we are measuring and how we are measuring it. And most importantly, the data that we collect should be processed properly, hopefully with full statistical analysis and full qualitative analysis. And of course, it should be done consistently. The measures and data collection process should be both efficient and feasible. Now, we interpret is through using different data points collected from different people, and that's why social constructivism is the basis of both interpretation of the results, and of course, as the basis, it is a basis for language learning and testing. So here is the framework. As I said, I look at it pragmatically through student-focused dimension, and I'm looking at two types of the concept of teaching effectiveness. Perceptions, and that can be measured through student opinions, which are collected through student evaluation of teaching, and also through retention, especially in non-formal adult education. Retention rate is a telling criterion. Students vote with their feet. They don't have to earn credit points like, for example, university students. So unless they are happy, they will leave the course. Now, alumni and experts' opinions are more probably problematic, more challenging to collect. These two are easily collected through student surveys or administrative data. But to collect alumni opinions, you have to spend some resources to get these people, to talk to them and to process their opinions. Usually alumni and expert opinions are sought during the accreditation process, but they do provide a very valuable insight to their experience. And as for learning outcomes, the usual thing what we usually look at is achievement tests, final exams in a course or final test. Sometimes we also look at formative assessment, coursework, or in the case of language learning, essays, for example, homework submitted. But that all refers to knowledge attainment, to how much students have learned by the time we teach them. However, adult language students are not interested really in passing a final test. They are interested in knowing language and using it after their course. So knowledge retention is, I would say, one of the very important indicators of teaching effectiveness. And it has to be delayed, so the test should be administered at least a year, I would say, for language. After the course, it has to be a proficiency rather than achievement test, so it should be testing what people can do rather than what they've learned. And it should also be external, not developed by the same teachers. And if you think that it's very difficult to do, then here is an example of applying this framework to 3 cohorts of students who studied English in the English Language Center, which was part of university. And thanks to COVID and thanks to, or rather due to, several consecutive governmental regulations, the face-to-face format had to be changed. We couldn't teach face-to-face, so I had to develop a new format, which I did as flipped blended, but it turned out that at one point we had to teach entirely online. So there were 3 cohorts of demographically comparable students, the same course content, the same material, the same team of teachers, just the 3 different modalities. And the data that I collected were student perceptions through sets, semi-structured interviews with alumni. And it just was my luck that those alumni were also expert educators, because they were university academics who studied English with us. And student retention rate, as I said, it's easily calculated. I assumed that if students received a certificate, then they attained the level they were studying at. It was not easy to receive a certificate. We didn't give them automatically, so that really certified that the knowledge was attained. And a year after the course, I administered, well, we offered our alumni a proficiency test, online test, external, it wasn't our test. And then I quantified the difference between the level shown in the test and the level from the course. So, for example, if a student finished the course at B2 plus level and the test results showed B2, then the difference was -1. If the difference was if the student showed B2 plus in the test, then the difference was 0. Okay, so that's the research design. As I said, the important thing is that everything for every cohort, every data point was collected at the same time, respectively. Yeah, so sets after the last day of course, then a test a year afterwards, and the interviews with alumni later. Here is the research sample. I've put retention rates right here. It's really easy to calculate. And then another thing is that the number of interviews were 9 altogether. The same students who studied face-to-face took a blended course as well. And the most important thing, I believe, is data processing. There are 2 publications related to that separately, but what I would like to stress that, unlike, at least in my experience, usually student evaluations of teaching is finished with mean values and standard deviation at best, I did full inferential statistical analysis for each level, and for example, for changes in level, some of the data were not normally distributed, so I did both parametric and non-parametric tests, just in case. And qualitative analysis was done for open questions within set, and also a thematical analysis of the interview. And then I was able to draw a conclusion, the final conclusion. So my point in this presentation is, first of all, that assessment of teaching effectiveness in adult courses should be done through student-focused dimension, and we have to look at student perceptions and learning outcomes, and knowledge retention is a significant learning outcome, albeit it requires resources. And then we need to properly process data before we make any conclusions as to how we teach. And yes, it requires resources. It might not be done with the same frequency. Not all measures may be applied with the same frequency. Like, for example, sets and student retention rates can be done for every group, for every course. Knowledge retention is not that easily, perhaps, to administer, to find out, but it is a very important measure. So it's still it's still possible. And of course, hopefully the university or institutional support is going to be provided for this. And here are some references and my contact detail. I